Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to each of you, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Karen Mitchell-Moore, and I'm the Head of Healthcare Division for NMG. Now, we of course understand how valuable your time is, but the importance of today's topic cannot be overstated. We are living through a massive real-time experiment in human development, and as parents, educators, mentors, there's an understanding the digital tax being paid for the next generation is really critical. To lead us into this very important topic, we are privileged to have Dr. Alicia Porter with us. Dr. Porter is a specialist child and adolescent psychiatrist who has dedicated her career to understanding the intersection of mental health and digital environments. Her work focuses on helping individuals, families, and organizations better understand behavior, build resilience, and navigate the pressures of modern life, which certainly include the growing impact of screen time and overload. Without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Alicia. Before I do that, very quickly, if you do have any questions, please pop them into the Q&A section, and we will certainly try and address as many of them as possible once Alicia has finished with her talk. Thank you so much. Over to you, Alicia.
Hey, good morning, Karen, and good morning to everybody online. Thank you so much, NMG, for the invitation. This has really been probably one of my most challenging webinars, in that I've realized that, yes, I may be presenting, information, I may be presenting this webinar, but this struggle is real, and I think we're all in the struggle together. So let's get straight in. This sounds very familiar. I'll just check this quickly. And 45 minutes later, you've disappeared into your screen. I think this happens on a daily basis, because I'll just check this quickly. Quickly can be 45 minutes. Sometimes it can be an hour. And sometimes when we look, it can be 3 hours. So, you pick up your phone for one thing, and suddenly we've disappeared, you've disappeared into it. And I think this is our current reality as people, as parents, as educators, I think this is a human problem. It's not just a parent problem, a child problem, a corporate problem. It's a human problem. Before I start, I think just to bring the South African reality home, on average, as South Africans, our daily screen time usage is 9 hours and 24 minutes. And on average, we spend 3 hours and 41 minutes strictly on social media. So as South Africans, we are not just average users when it comes to screen time. We are actually leading globally. Those who say we never win at anything, I know the World Cup is coming up. It's the opening ceremony tonight, and we're hoping that Bafana wins. But in the screen time arena, as South Africans, we are global winners. And that is a scary statistic. And so the average South African spends nearly 10 hours a day looking at a screen. That's 10 hours of a 24-hour day. And that is our reality as South Africans. The thing is that when it comes to phones, there's definitely the stories that we tell ourselves about these, amazing contraptions that we hold in our hands, versus what is actually the reality of our habits. Because today I don't want to talk about phones and the dangers of phones. And I think we're well aware of all of those things. We are in uncharted territory. But I think today I really want us to stop and think about the gadget that we hold in our hands and what it means and what's actually happening. What is the thing that is getting us hooked on this on the screen. So, you know, the illusion, I think, when we think about phones is that we think that we're seeking. So phones are for pleasure and entertainment. But the reality of what we're actually experiencing is that there's restless anticipation and it's variable reward. I'm going to explain variable reward a little bit later. But variable reward is the psychology even behind gambling and the psychology behind casinos and slot machines. The other illusion is that what we think we're curing by our phones is boredom. But what we're actually escaping is that discomfort, difficult thoughts, and the silence. And what we think we're building via phones, because we're always on, constantly backward and forward. You know, just before the webinar started, there's a person in the background who's in Switzerland, in Cape Town, others in. So we think we're building connection, but actually what we're doing is we're numbing ourselves through proximity without presence. And the thing is that we don't reach for our phones because we're necessarily bored. Oftentimes we reach for our phones because we are uncomfortable. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to challenge you to go back into your phone and particularly your picture histories, because pictures tell a story. And I want you to look at pictures from, say, 5 years ago, particularly like family pictures or, you know, pictures where there are people sitting around or, you know, pictures, and see where the phone is in those pictures. And then I want you to fast forward to today, particularly if there are things or uncomfortable things that have happened in your life, uncomfortable things that have happened in your family. And then I want you to see where the phones are in those pictures. And it's quite an interesting exercise, which I actually was challenged to do myself. And I found that, you know, maybe 5 years ago, the phone was very peripheral. And now in lots of pictures based on circumstances and relationships, they're front and center. So maybe just have a look and see where that discomfort has come from. So the reality is that, you know, sometimes we think the cure is that we can just put it down. But the reality is that we can't just put it down. And we can't just put it down because of a lovely neurochemical called dopamine. Now, for the longest time, we've believed that dopamine has got to do with satisfaction. You know, and dopamine is the feel-good chemical. The problem with dopamine is that it's got nothing to do with pleasure. It's got nothing to do with satisfaction. What dopamine does is that it's actually seeking. So it's all about anticipation. It's that come back, check again neurotransmitter. So your dopamine doesn't create the satisfaction. All it does is allow you to keep coming back. And so the other thing about the phone is that it's what we call a variable reward. So a variable reward means, so if you knew that every 3 scrolls, something good is going to happen, it takes away the excitement of it. But variable reward says that you don't know what's coming next, and maybe this next one will be a good one. And so you have to just keep going, which is what happens at a slot machine. You're hooked by the big win, and then it's this constant, I have to keep coming back because maybe the next press of the lever will get me there. The other thing as to why we can't put the phone down is because it's an emotional escape, not for all of us, not all the time, but it can serve as a distraction. And that can be a form of instant relief. You think about, you know, uncomfortable situations. You go to a party, you don't know anybody. What is the first thing that you do? It's also a novelty and alerting system. Because the way our brains are wired for what's new. It's like, ladies, when you are in a shopping center and you see the sale signs, it's like your brain goes, or even online, it's the flashes, the promo codes. That's what our brain is wired to actually attract. What's new, what's exciting. And the problem is that our brain doesn't know the difference between information and overload. So our survival system, in terms of how our brain works, is actually in overdrive. And so the long and short is that we're seeking, we scroll, and then it's a repeat. So it's a cycle that's just continuous. And the thing about dopamine is that it doesn't reward you for finishing. It actually just keeps you coming back because you need the fix, you need the fix. But instead of going to the casino, we're scrolling on our phones. And the thing is that this is not a willpower problem, which I think has been the biggest frustration. It's actually a design problem. Because if you think about scrolling on your phone, it's not like reading a book. Of course, yes, you get Kindles and you can actually read a book on your phone. But the thing about screens and our phones is that sometimes there's something interesting, sometimes there isn't. You never know which it will be. And so it's that exact mechanism that keeps you hooked, the coming back for the high. And so essentially, our phones are like casinos in our pockets. Like I said, we don't reach because we're bored. We reach because we're uncomfortable. And so there's a feeling of discomfort, anxiety, or boredom. It's a reflex reach for the phone. The result is that it's instant emotional regulation and distraction. But the cost is that a weakened capacity to sit with our own thoughts. And so our phones unknowingly have become the quickest form of emotional regulation, which is not sustainable over time. And what we're doing is that we're training our brains to struggle with stillness because it's the constant switching of apps, checking mid-task. I mean, I don't know how many times I've started sending, for example, a WhatsApp reply, and then days later, I realized I actually, because mid-task, I switched because something else got my attention, that it was an unsent message, unsent email. And also that constant responding to alerts. I mean, I was going to the airport yesterday, and then suddenly on my alert pops up, travel warning, you're going towards an area where some crime has happened. I mean, I would have been none the wiser had that not happened, because I'm not really one to, follow current affairs. Well, not always. So, and suddenly there's this now anticipation or an anxiety that I didn't have. And so it's this constant struggle. And if you think about attention, it's actually a muscle. It's a muscle that needs to be built. And that is why it's the same with children. There's been, what we're seeing is an increase in attention and concentration difficulties. And I think, although purely just anecdotal, that screens play a part in that, because that muscle is not being given an opportunity to develop. There's no practice happening, because with screens, I mean, kids learn how to navigate screens before they can read, because it's either green or red. I'm always amazed when I watch my own kids, I watch my nieces, my nephews. They can't read, but they can navigate a screen. And so every interruption is a tiny cut to our focus. And basically what we're then doing is that we're physically training our brains for distraction rather than using our attention muscle. And the thing about it is that we often, and even for myself, say, okay, I just need more willpower. I just need more willpower. But actually, it's not a willpower issue when it comes to phones and screens, because we're not fighting laziness. We're trying to win a neurological battle against a system that is actually designed to keep us losing. And if you think about your social media feed versus your partner's social media feed versus your friend's social media feed. I mean, my feed is full of, empowerment and holidays and rowing. My husband's is bicycles, cars. So it's really a system that has been designed, and the algorithms in the background that keep us coming back and keep us hooked. And I think the reality is that the willpower trap, it's really a myth. And I think we're diagnosing the wrong problem, because what we think is happening with our screens is that it's a time management failure. But the biological reality and what's actually happening is that it's an environmental mismatch. So when we're uncomfortable, we reach for our phones. The perceived cause of why we're reaching for our screens is that it's a lack of personal discipline and poor habits. But the actual cause is that we're being neuro-hijacked on a daily basis, and there's emotional avoidance. And the assumed solution, and I don't know about you, but I've seriously failed. The solution is try harder, delete apps, rely on willpower. I mean, I don't know how many times I've deleted and then reloaded apps. But actually, the true solution is that we actually need to re-engineer our environments to protect our nervous systems, because our response to the screens is happening at a nervous system level. It's not at a willpower level. And so it's not a willpower problem. It's actually a biological vulnerability that is being created. And so the biggest risk of screen time is not wasted time, because most people view screen time purely as a productivity loss. But actually, from a psychiatric perspective, the true danger actually lies in what that constant stimulation does to our emotional lives. And what we don't realize is that we may have pre-existing emotional vulnerabilities. We also have genetic vulnerabilities, like, for example, we get, individuals who are naturally anxious. They have an anxious temperament, or, they have a temperament that is difficult or irritable. So those pre-existing emotional vulnerabilities actually may be impacted by the constant stimulation that is happening within our emotional lives. And so screens don't cause all mental health problems. That's not what I'm saying. But they interact relentlessly with our vulnerabilities that we already have. And I'm not sure how many of us are actually aware of what vulnerabilities we actually carry. And then there's the 4 silent costs of constant connection. There are many more, but I'm going to talk about these because they directly impact even our overall well-being. And that's sleep. And what's happening with regards to screens and our sleep is that we're actually sacrificing our foundation. Then there's the attention, because we're getting fragmenting of our focus, the comparison, where our insecurities are being multiplied, and avoidance, where we're bypassing our discomfort. The problem is that we're asking our brains to slow down, because essentially that's what sleep is. I mean, at the very foundational basic level, we know that sleep is restorative. You need to sleep in order for your body to recover. We know all of these things. But what we're asking our brains to do is slow down, but we're actually pressing the accelerator when we are using our phones just before we go to sleep. So sleep is not a luxury. It never has been. I read a book once that said the greatest measure of wealth is a good night's sleep, because sleep is actually emotional first aid. But oftentimes we end our days in ways where our brains, they were never designed to endure. So the bright lights, So I'm going to say, yes, there's the blue light guards, and, we kind of think that we are protecting ourselves from the light. But the problem is that when there's light, your sleep hormone, which is melatonin, is not going to be released. So the bright light actually disrupts your sleep cycle. But it's not only the bright light, it's also the constant stimulation and then the endless scrolling. So we're trying to slow down, but we've got our foot on the accelerator. And what that then results in is anxiety, burnout, low mood, poor concentration. I mean, if you just think about the morning after a night when you haven't slept, I don't think that you are at your best in any way. And the problem is that what then starts to happen is a chronic sleep debt, and there's a lack of recovery. And recovery is what ensures or enables us to continue functioning. It's not so much just resting, but it is recovery. And so a lot of people don't have an anxiety problem. They have a sleep deprivation problem that's disguised as anxiety. And oftentimes we also then normalize, like, now I can only get 5 hours sleep. Our bodies were never designed to run on just 5 hours of sleep. The problem is that with our phones also, individually, it's harmless, but collectively, it can be quite exhausting because there's reels, there's headlines, there's notifications, there's news alerts, there's WhatsApps, there's so many things in a day. And so it really is thinking about it in the sense of you trying to have a meaningful conversation, but there's 20 people that keep tapping you on your shoulder. Have you ever tried to have a conversation when there's constant interruptions? So again, our brains were never designed to process this much of fragmented information. So every single ping actually is a taxing demand on our attention. And so what's happening is that we're drowning in information, but we're actually starving for wisdom because it's very fragmented. So nothing is really taking root or landing. And then there's the other cost, which is comparison. Now, as humans, we have always compared. But with screens, the problem now is the scale of the comparison. So now we don't just compare ourselves to our immediate community, your neighbor, your friend, your cousin, your colleague. Now we're bombarded simultaneously by someone else's promotion, someone else's holiday, someone else's fitness journey, and someone else's perfect family photo. And the problem, particularly with social media, is that if you just like a picture, even if that person is not my contact, it's going to come up on my feed. And so what's happening then is that we're comparing ourselves to millions of people all at once, those known and unknown to us. And what comparison does is that it steals gratitude because it convinces us that what we have is not enough. And it's the scale of it, because it's not just one person anymore. It's so many people. And that then is the silent cost of that comparing. And the other silent cost is anxiety. And the thing about anxiety is that it loves uncertainty. So where there's uncertainty, anxiety grows and it festers. And the thing about social media is that it delivers it on demand without us even knowing it. Our brains in their natural environment crave certainty and safety. Anxiety can be protective, but the problem with our social media is that there's a continuous exposure either to global outrage, to predictions, conflicts, and this causes the brain to interpret the feed as a constant, immediate physical danger. And basically, our survival brain goes into overdrive because your nervous system actually doesn't know the difference between being informed and being overwhelmed. And so what we're doing then is constantly activating the survival pathways. And so our brain goes from being in rest into survival mode unknowingly. And then there's the avoidance, and that's the mental health cost that nobody talks about, because the smartphone has become the world's most accessible coping mechanism. But what it is just temporary distraction, and it's not processing, because it's the discomfort. Then you bypass the discomfort by scrolling on the phone. You're going to get the temporary numbness. And then the return is the original feeling, and that's often amplified. And the problem is that we can't really heal from what we continually avoid. We have to name it in order to tame it. And the things that we avoid don't disappear. They actually wait for us. So we essentially kicking the can down the road. So maybe just as a pause at this point to reflect is, what feeling do you most often escape through your phone? Maybe you haven't thought about it, or maybe it's not necessarily conscious, but I think it's something to think about, that what feeling do you most often escape through your phone? Is it boredom? Is it loneliness? Is it stress? Is it sadness? Is it uncertainty? And I think it's something to think about. But I just want to share a story, my own story. It was about 2021, where I was invited, or I decided to do this. It's called the Tankwa Camino. It's a South African Camino. It's 270 kilometers, 10 days, from Calvinia in the Northern Cape to Ceres in the Western Cape on foot. And the thing about the Tankwa Camino is that it is through the sort of Northern Cape into Western Cape desert. So 8 of those 10 days we were without signal, but it was also something that was unbeknown to us when we registered for this walk. And, you know, as somebody who is always on, always connected, it was quite a disruption, in the sense that there was no signal, and all we saw for 10 days was just road, 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 and more road. You know, the saying which says, may the road rise to meet you. This was on repeat. And so there was a lot of discomfort. And I can remember, because even my smartwatch didn't have reception. And what ensued in the first at least 3 days, it took essentially to kind of lean in, where there was this discomfort, there was this restlessness, irritability, and then there was a reflex urge to like reach for the phone. The phone wasn't working, but there's this urge. You're walking and then you reach for your phone. And really what I realized was that I wasn't reaching for relief. What I was reaching for wasn't connection. I needed relief from this discomfort of the fact that I was completely disconnected from my world. But by about day 4, started to settle, where I was now forced to sit with my own thoughts, my own pace, my own discomfort. And it was kind of just relaxing into that piece. The interesting thing is that we got signal on day 8, but we then put our phones on airplane mode. So we didn't rush back. And that constant connection actually felt quite intrusive. And the thing about that experience is that, like, the world still continued turning on its axis, because I think sometimes we think, if I'm not connected, you know, the world is going to fall down, or it's going to come off its axis. But the world continued to turn. And, you know, I realized, reflecting back on that experience, that there is even a biological half-life of digital distraction. And that process through that period of time kind of brought that home for me. And so we didn't really realize the noise until it was gone. And being constantly connected, when we finally got signal, we actually put our phones on flight mode by choice. And so what is this constant connection costing us that we can't even see? I I think that the hidden cost with regards to that disconnect isn't really time. I think it's lost connection, because it's the difference between being physically there's a difference between being physically present and emotionally available. When we're physically present, oftentimes when the phone is part of the gathering, there's fragmented conversation. I mean, I don't know how many times, a fight in our house starts because one person is talking and another person is on their phone. You can't really give attention to both. And then midway through, you ask like for an opinion and you're like, I don't actually know what the question was. Also, there's decreased eye contact. There's something really therapeutic about looking somebody in the eye. And then it's the split attention, because emotional availability is that deep listening, the sustained gaze, and emotional attunement. And that's where the disconnect happens. So the hidden cost is not the time that we're spending, it's that there's been a lost connection. And it's the big disconnect that's happening in our lives, in our relationships, and even in our workspaces. Because attention really is the currency of relationships. And the problem is that connection happens in the pauses that we actually now keep interrupting with screens. And maybe I would like to ask, when last were you fully present without the distraction of the casino in your pockets? And the problem is that our needs can't be met by digital diets, because what screens offer is frictionless avoidance, endless novelty and stimulation, vast but shallow networks, information without context. We've become pen pals and we talk constantly over text. But I mean, how many times have you been texting somebody and you talk so much over text and on email? And when you meet each other, it's like silence, uncomfortable, And what our mental wellness actually requires is us to sit with the discomfort and actually to learn to tolerate the distress of discomfort rather than discharging it. Our mental wellness requires rest and stillness. And it also requires deep emotionally available connection. And it requires meaning, purpose, and presence. And none of these things can be sustained from a screen. And the building blocks of a healthy nervous system haven't changed. And I think, we have progressed so far in the digital space, but it really is about coming back to the basics of movement, meaning, connection, stillness, and sleep is still the greatest measure of wealth. The reason forced disconnection feels so restorative is that all things that actually nourish mental well-being become impossible to ignore. And so, as I move into the last part of this webinar, I want to say that the goal is not less technology. I think the goal is about being more intentional, because technology is a wonderful servant, but it's a terrible master. And so disconnecting entirely is not the goal, but the goal is actually building a life where technology serves your biological and emotional needs rather than hijacking them, which is what is currently happening. So I'm just going to end off with just some practical ways in which we can think around resetting, because like I say, the goal is not absolute disconnection. It's thinking around creating some friction and also some boundaries. But again, it's going to be the little things and the little steps and small steps. So, it's things like speed bumps where you make it harder because if there's no friction, then it wins. It's thinking around having bookends where you protect the first and the last hour of your day, because how you start your day shapes how you start and end, shapes what happens in the middle. Then there's thinking around phone-free zones, where protecting your physical spaces, because what we don't protect, we actually then lose. And it's about naming the need. I am going to just expand on these areas individually, but it's thinking around, what do I need right now? Because I think awareness creates choices. So in terms of, engineering the friction, because it is important to have speed bumps, because if you think about on a road, speed bumps is what slows us down, and having protected zones. So, with the speed bump, it makes it physically harder to reach. So for example, instead of charging your phone at your bedside, which is easy to, when you get up in the middle of the night to go to use the toilet, it's like that light just comes on because it senses your movements. You come back, and before you know it, you've been an hour scrolling, responding to emails. And so create a speed bump, make it physically harder to reach. Maybe charge your phone in the passage, or further away from your bedside. So I think that would assist in kind of slowing it down, or at least creating fiction. I know many say, but I've got the alarm on my phone, and maybe this is now the return of the alarm clock. I don't know. Or if it's further away from your bed, but still in the room, those are things. The other thing is that we need to protect moments, because like I said, what we don't protect, we lose. So there needs to be phone-free things that we do, like no phones at the dinner table. You got to put it in the basket before you get to the dinner table. Because there's something about sitting and eating together and looking at each other. And then also creating phone-free zones, be it that bedrooms are phone-free zones. So we do need to think around engineering that friction and protecting those zones, because we need to separate the device from the spaces where rest and connection happen, because if we don't, it's actually just become all intertwined. And then the bookends. This is about protecting the edges of your day. So instead of thinking around no phones the whole day, just think about the first hour of your day. So wake up to your own life, not the world's urgency, no scrolling. I mean, if you think about during COVID and, the amounts of fake news, I can remember the day when I woke up and it was like Idris Elba died. The first thing you hear in the morning. I mean, it was fake news, yes, but like that's waking up to that when there were so many other things competing for your attention. And then you go about your workday and your activities, and then protect the last hour, where you let the nervous system actually power down and you transition from that stimulation to stillness. Because how you start your day and how you end your day actually shapes what happens in between. Is it as easy as that? No, but I think it starts with at least the awareness, and we start to implement it. Yes, you may get it right. Sometimes you may get it wrong more than you get it right initially, but it's just that continuous practice, because now we actually having to rewire our systems. And then it's about naming the need, because awareness definitely creates choice. And so when your hand reaches for the phone, maybe it's about asking yourself, what do I actually read right now? Am I seeking distraction from a difficult task? Am I seeking relief from anxiety? Am I seeking connection because I feel lonely? Or am I seeking escape from boredom? So it's around identifying the underlying discomfort, and you strip the habit of its automatic power, because you've become aware, and so that awareness creates the choice. And so back to the Tanquis story, it was really about reconnecting with what we left behind. So I didn't come home from the Tanquis and throw away my phone. That wasn't the lesson. The lesson really was remembering what it felt like to hear my own thoughts, to sit with discomfort, to notice the people around me, and also to notice myself. So the challenge really is not to disconnect from technology. It's to reconnect with that technology. It's to reconnect with what technology has distracted us from. And really, silence can be uncomfortable until silence actually becomes freedom. And so, the disconnection didn't take something away, it actually gave something back. And really, just as a last closing thought, your attention is actually your life. And if we don't choose where our attention goes, something else will. And I'm so reminded of George Orwell's book, 1984. I must have read it about 20 years ago, where it said, Big Brother is watching you. And it was really interesting because at the time I thought, like, absolutely not, like utter nonsense. But here we are with Big Brother watching us. And if we don't choose where our attention goes, something else will. Thank you.
Dr. Porter, wow, that was truly insightful. Thank you so much. I think there were a few things that resonated with myself, and I'm sure with the rest of our guests here today. And I think I particularly love the tips that you gave us, the practical reset tips. And certainly to everyone that is in the room, we are definitely going to be sharing this video with you, this recording. And certainly, if there's an opportunity for us to present this to a broader audience group, we're very, very comfortable to do that as well. I think we do have a couple of questions for you. If I could just start with the first one. Is listening to an audiobook or a podcast regarded as screen time?
So listening wouldn't be regarded as screen time because we're listening to an audio book. We're not having a competition for our attention. It's about those things that fragment our attention, that scrolling, the constant, being disrupted by the alerts. It's that is eating away at our concentration.
Okay, thank you. The next one, how does one navigate effects of smartwatches, sleep time apps, step counts, and other lifestyle games that can sometimes dictate your life? Is that something that we also need to be more conscious about? Can it also be detrimental?
So I think, with regards to smartphones, it was very interesting because when I was doing the exercise of like trying to protect the first hour and the last hour, I found myself actually then reaching for my phone now. And so I think it's exactly the same because now it's just not so much in our pockets, it's on our wrists. So I think the same sort of aspects would apply in that it's competing for our attention. It's also very interesting that we've got sleep monitors on our wrists. I mean, every morning, I literally feel like my phone says some horrible things to me around my sleep. It may not be my sort of subjective experience, but I'm never quite getting there. It's never quite enough. It's always telling me, I often say it's swearing at me early in the morning about my, the quality of my sleep. And then it's such a tension because these are the things that are meant to enhance our lives, but actually they are creating distress. And so, it's that as soon as you get up, you reach for let me see what my sleep score. So again, I think it's something that needs to be managed. And it's something that we have to determine how we use it rather than how it's actually interrupting our lives.
No, actually, and I completely agree with you because very often my sleep score says that I actually possibly have not slept at all, which creates an enormous amount of anxiety for me.
So
The next,
or
sorry.
tell Corinne, that you've been stressed over the last few days and
Yes.
feel more tired than you. Like, that's not like affirmation I need to hear early in the morning.
No. And I think that's particularly why I like that first, the book notes. I think that could work quite well for most of us. The next point I have here, they've written, good idea. I would love to view this with my family. These gadgets and connectivity has stolen so much of our time and the attention with each other. That's then the next one. There's a question, what about ebooks? Is that a concern?
So, I mean, I think again, it's around what is the, what is it taking away anything? So again, I think an ebook would be similar to reading a book because it's not that constant dopamine seek. It's not the discomfort. It's not the reaching. So I think ebooks are a little bit different. I think it's the same as audio books where you're focusing your attention. It's not stealing, from it.
Okay. There's a question here. How can we help our children to cut down on screen time? It used to be fun when we could get a lot done while they watch cartoons, YouTube, but not anymore as they seem to be addicted.
So that's a very interesting one because, I see lots of children and adolescents and families. And oftentimes children model what they see. And so with regards to screen time, I think it starts with us as the adults and what it is that we are modeling to our children. But it is very important because now even like when I see kids and families, even that intake or that assessment has changed because I need to know what's happening with the screen time. And then we need to put in those boundaries just like we do for ourselves. So for example, with children, depending on their age, that is how we would determine how much they would require. So, kids of school going age, 2 hours maximum on screens. That doesn't include like the fact that there's lots of schoolwork that happens, but that's your maximum. And then it's the creating those phone-free zones. So dinner time is a phone-free area. It's, in our house, phones do not charge in children's bedrooms. They need to charge in the common areas. And so it's thinking around what is your family digital safety plan. And we need to protect kids from ourselves. So often I'll have parents say, yeah, but they're going to be upset. Or yes, that's fine. But it's important because this is still a developing brain. It doesn't know. It's like a Ferrari with no brakes. We are the braking system. Therefore, we need to put in the measures. So for a child to say, no, but we've got this, but you've got the screen time, the screen time alerts. And so you put the screen time off. Yes, okay, but you're going to still hand your phone in because kids are very smart. So we can't depend on them to be able to manage it or kind of hand over that responsibility to them. As parents, we need to assist, but we also need to start modeling that because there's something quite powerful. It's not about what you say, it's about what they see.
Absolutely. I think they learn by example, right? And it's about creating healthy habits. And it definitely needs to start with us. Dr. Porter, there aren't any more questions. In fact, there might have been one that just crept in. Let me just have a look. How helpful are screen time app blockers?
So I'm going to say that they are helpful, they're tools, but you can't only depend on them. You have to do the work because I'm going to say that kids are smarter than we are when it comes to the digital space. There are many times, even in my own family, where we've blocked an app and now we cannot understand how my teenage son has bypassed that and he's now got the app again when it was blocked. So you have to constantly, and it's not a kind of one size fits all, and it's not a single event. It's that constant checking, constant monitoring, not because you're invading their privacy. I bought the phone.
Mm.
I'm not invading your privacy. I'm protecting you from yourself.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Well, thank you so much. It was a truly insightful session. I don't think there are any questions. And to the audience, thank you so much for attending today. I hope you got as much value out of it as I did. And we hope to see you all again at the very next one. And lastly, Dr. Porter, thank you. Your time is appreciated today, and the insights were extremely valuable. Have a good day, everyone, and we hope to see you again soon.